Hi everyone, I am Cadet Emily Rowley, your Professional Development Training Officer, and this is Aircast. This week we will be discussing how to keep up with your academics with Cadet Sebastian Lemieux.
Hi everyone, I'm Cadet Sebastian Lemieux. I'm going to be the Academic Officer for Det 665 this coming semester.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started then. How do you stay organized?
So, as Academic Officer, I'm going to be helping all the cadets in the wing kind of work through their academic challenges, and staying organized is definitely something that, especially if you're new to college, you're going to struggle with a little bit. I know I did myself. I kind of started off by just having a planner and keeping in track all of my assignments, but you quickly accumulate too much paper and too many assignments to really just have that work out. So I started really just purging my academic supplies. I think that would be the first thing I would tell someone who's struggling to stay organized, to purge all your academic stuff, because I remember in high school they always told me to hang on to all of my notebooks, hang on to all of my assignments and papers, just in case they would be helpful later on. And if I did that in college, I wouldn't have space in my apartment to keep all of my papers and stuff. So I'd say if you have an assignment and you got 100 on it and you don't need to access that anymore, I would just throw it out. Like, honestly, if you want to, you can keep a screen cap of it. I'm sure everyone, if you've been doing online classes, knows of OneDrive. You can scan documents and keep them digitally. So I'd say purging your supplies is definitely something that helps with organization. Other than that, I have a label maker. So I like to label shelves and label notebooks and label everything. And if you don't have that, you can just use a Sharpie and just getting a specific spot for everything. So I have a different notebook for every class, which is kind of a lot of paper, but it really helps with organization. I have different shelves for different academic supplies, and just things like that really help, so that way when you are working on a specific class, you open up a brand new notebook, you're using a different set of like pencils or whatever you want, and it really helps to differentiate not only physically your different supplies, but mentally you're now ready to start a new task, you're starting a new class, you can get in the mindset of physics versus chemistry or whatever class it goes from another. So that's kind of where I'm at with organization.
Yeah, I think like staying organized is a really good way of making sure you have a clear mind, especially when you're having to juggle so many classes. When your stuff's not organized, then it's just going to make it more stressful and harder to keep on top of all of your assignments.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Do you have any note-taking tips?
Yeah, so have you ever heard of Cornell notes?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's something that if you're familiar with Cornell notes, they're really kind of a pain in the butt to do all the time.
Yeah, I remember doing that for like a movie, like in English 11 in high school.
Yeah, so when you're doing notes on things that are important, it's not as arduous, but if you don't know, Cornell notes are essentially where you take your paper that you're taking notes on, you section it off into a large section of the paper on the right-hand side where you take your actual notes, and then a smaller margin on the left-hand side where you write questions about the notes you wrote down, which you do after you've written your notes, and then later on you write a summary of your notes at the bottom of the page.
So you actually do this for like all your classes?
I used to. Kind of with online classes, I moved towards digital, but now I'm getting back into it, and it really helps because it forces you to look back at your notes, because a lot of times you'll write something down and maybe only like 50 to 60% of what you wrote down is important. But if you look over everything, you won't be focused on just the other 40% and keep that in your brain. You're forced to look over all your notes, so when that information comes back up on a test or for your homework or other assignments, you don't have to shuffle through your notes. You've already gone over them once to ask a question, and then gone over them again to write a summary. So I kind of do a modified version of that. I'll write out all my notes for like a certain lesson, and then at the end of that lesson I'll write a summary. So that kind of takes down the time, but looking over, especially when you get into higher level courses like gas dynamics, or we'll be doing like aerodynamics, because we're both engineering students, so we know that jumping between one class to another, there's a lot of concepts that overlap. So asking those questions and doing that can not only help you, but also your other people in your class, because you can ask questions that help others as well.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that a lot of the things that you write down aren't actually going to be useful to you. And so for me, I like to really just make sure I'm focusing in on the lesson and to make sure I'm writing down the things that I actually understand. So not just writing down things that I don't understand, because then it's harder to look over. But it seems like you have a good system of you making sure that you do understand what you've written down.
Yeah, I agree. I also think just another note-taking tip is to do it like on old-fashioned pen and paper.
Yeah.
You know, writing notes on a laptop is something you can do, but it's been proven that doing that, even if you study lessons verbatim and write down everything the professor says, you're not going to retain as much information as if you tactily write it down. So don't overdo it. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that works for some people, but yeah, for me at least, and I think for engineering it kind of works better to go ahead and use your pen and paper, because you're gonna have to do problems too, and it's hard to write out your work and like look over your work on a laptop. Unless you like have Apple Pen or something
Exactly,
like
yeah.
that.
The new Surface tablets, maybe you could get away with it, but at least with what I have, I can't write on my laptop, and pen and paper is cheaper. So,
what study habits have been successful for you?
as far as study habits, I would say not trying to cram is a big thing. It happens to all of us, and it's a week before the exam, and you end up having to study 2 months worth of material in like 3 days. So what I try and do is, if I know an exam's going to come up, especially if you get your syllabus right at the beginning of the semester, before I do anything in that first week where you don't have too many assignments, you can put like a reminder on your Outlook calendar or whatever calendar you have, like a week or two before an exam's supposed to be, and say, hey, review your material. So if you know you're struggling in a class, you can look back on the material that you're missing, or ask your professor for help, because reaching out to your professor is going to immensely help on what you don't understand. You could spend 7 hours by yourself on the material you don't understand versus an hour with your professor, and they'll explain it more.
Yeah, there's some things that you just really are going to need someone to help you with once you're getting into your higher level classes. Like, you can't just do it all on your own.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then I would say, other than setting yourself reminders and talking to your professor, I would say making sure you have a good support group to study with, because I know for a fact I wouldn't be where I am in engineering if I didn't have other engineering students around to help. So right now it's kind of hard to do with classes being online, but there's Discord, there's GroupMe, and then if you can meet up with people at a library, if you can do that. Relying on other students is not a bad thing, as long as you're collaborating and not just taking someone else's work. You have to make sure there's a fine line between just taking other people's knowledge and using that, and just making sure you get your assignments in, versus working with other people and actually collaborating to further the understanding of everyone in the group. And doing that, it exponentially increases your knowledge retention. So
yeah, one thing that I do to make sure I'm studying effectively is like try to get a hold of practice problems and try to understand like what's actually going to be on the exam and practice that. That really only kind of applies to STEM majors, but I'm sure there's other ways you can make sure that you're prepared for what's actually going to be on the exam in non-STEM majors too. What is something that you have found difficult with online learning?
So I'd say the most difficult part of online learning is, I hate to say it, but the motivation to stay concentrated. Because at least for me, when I would go to classes, I'd be in a physical setting. It would put my mind in a very active framework. And when I go into a physical classroom, I'm sitting down and all I'm doing for that next hour and a half or hour is focusing on that study material. When you're at home and you go from online classes to homework to your free time, it's all in kind of that same locale.
Right. So
you can't really get that physical separation that I find beneficial to work on, your schoolwork frame of mind versus whatever personal work. Because especially with being in Air Force ROTC and classes, I would do Air Force ROTC stuff at the detachment, so I would get work with that done there, and I could really grind on AFROTC stuff, and then I would do my academic work at the engineering library, where they have whiteboards and resources for you there. So I think that's been the hardest thing, is I have to do everything at my desk.
Yeah, I also find that challenging, trying to stay focused, just staring at the same laptop screen for an hour and a half, and then you have to do that 4 more times that day. It is really difficult. But yeah, I would say probably just to try to stay engaged by taking notes and asking your professor questions in real time. It doesn't really work if they have a pre-recorded lecture, but if they have a live lecture, then it's good to take advantage of that.
Yeah, the live lectures definitely help a lot. And then if you can just, for like 10 minutes, like change your scenery, you know, go walk around, go outside or whatever, so that way you aren't sitting at a desk all day and you kind of lose that track of time where all of a sudden it's like 8 p.m. and you haven't done any assignments.
Right. Have you noticed any advantages to online learning?
So, online learning is definitely not, at least for me, my preferred. But I would say the one advantage is that your assignments are a little more free as far as like when you can do them. Because you don't have physical classes that you need to go to and be there in physical location, so you gain that extra time that you would have when you have to go on campus.
That's something I like too, because it takes a good 30 minutes walking all day.
Yeah.
Probably longer if you have like 4 classes in one day and you're walking between buildings, and then it takes your time to get up to the campus, takes time to come back, and being able to just be at a lecture by the click of a mouse, you really kind of gain a little bit of time. Yeah,
I would say online learning does have that benefit of time. You have the extra time instead of walking to classes, but you have to make sure you use that time effectively. Because I personally still find myself more efficient walking to classes and spending 30 to 40 minutes there, or walking around and going to a lecture and then doing my classwork on campus, rather than being at home where I have a free 2.5 hour block period where I could do whatever I want and I have like 7 assignments lined up. So if you really organize your time well and say, okay, I'm just going to work on one assignment at a time, online learning I think has that benefit.
Also, you can kind of use your extra time for other things. I like to use it for sleep.
Yeah, you definitely do gain a lot. I'm less sleep deprived now than I have been in the last like year and a half when I was in college. You definitely get about 5 to 6 as an engineering student on a good night, and on online classes you can usually get 8.
How does, well, we kind of already touched on this, but how does setting affect your quality of learning?
Yeah, so I guess that does go back to what we talked about on online learning, that the setting really, for me at least, puts me in a better mental state. I remember being in my first year of college, I was able to, I liked how UC has like the little snack bars in the dining halls, because I could go there, grab food, eat breakfast, and then grab a little snack, and I would go to my chemistry lecture, which is in a big lecture hall of like 400 kids, right? And a lot of people don't like that because you can't be as one-on-one with the professor. But I liked it because the content had been kind of watered down for everyone to consume, so I could really easily just sit down and take notes and really just kind of absorb all the material the professor is saying. Now as you get to higher level engineering courses, it's, I'd say, easier to do previously than online. I'm glad I didn't have to do my first classes online. But the setting is a lot more personable. We're in classes of about 20 to 23 students now. I don't know other majors, they're probably a little bit of a different setting. But in those settings, if you actually take the time to interact with your professor, with only like 25 to 30 kids in the room, as long as you're awake and active and actually ask questions, that gets you more depth of knowledge than I think you could really get in any of those other lecture settings. You get to know the professor, you get to kind of know how they grade things, and then the more you talk to them, the more they understand how their students are doing. And a lot of times if you talk to them the right way, they'll kind of change assignments and shift things around if they know how you're doing and how other classes are affecting you. So I think you can get that with online a little better with your higher level courses because there's less people, but I still prefer that in-person setting.
Yeah. But one thing, though, that I think really affects my quality of learning or quality of work is kind of the time of day. Everyone kind of has their time of day where they just get a boost of energy. For me, I work better at night, so I know that I'm going to be able to kick out a lot of work when it comes 8 o'clock at night. But some people, they're morning people, so if you're one of those people, then make sure you start, doing your work when it's best for you. Yeah,
I'm kind of a morning person that hates to be a morning person. Because when Obviously, Air Force PT, you got to wake up early in the morning. And my frame of mind was, I'm already awake. If I can get all of my work done before I get tired tonight, I'll do that. So, But yeah, you definitely have to find out what works for you because each person's different. So that's something.
For me, I like to come home from PT, take a nap, and then...
Yeah, I could never do that because if I took a nap, I'd be tired for the rest of the day. So I would say my advice: try being a morning person if you can.
Well, but some people aren't, and
no, that's true.
And if you're a morning person, then do what Cadet Lemieux says. If you're a night person, I think that doing work at night I produce a lot of work at night. Like, I would be doing my laundry at like 2 a.m.
Yeah, I did get a lot of homework done doing laundry at like 2 a.m. So, I don't know, maybe I'm just not as functional as a person as I
Well, that's okay. Everyone has their hiccups. What are things that you think about when working in a group?
It depends on the group you're working with, right? So I would say in Air Force ROTC, there's a different frame of mind versus working with engineering students. You kind of have to, we talk about the switch when you're talking with ROTC, like POC, customs and courtesies and everything, versus when you're talking in a non-ROTC capacity. And I think I found that same thing when working with different groups of different people. Because with Air Force, there's a very common goal and there's a very, I would just say more like chain of command mindset almost, where when you're in a group, you're going to have someone who's a leader and then you're going to have followers and then you have to get a mission done. So I think in those type of settings where you do have like kind of a hierarchy going on,
right,
you should try and use kind of some of the aspects they teach us in our AS classes is try and form out and whether it be formally or informally, pick someone to kind of lead the charge, whether that be saying, hey, you write down these things or this person will like track hours or this person will get this part of the assignment done and then go on from there. And once everyone kind of has a task to do, that makes things run more efficiently.
Yeah, so just make sure you're delegating all responsibilities.
Yes, exactly. And to a degree, you do that with engineering as well, but you have to approach it differently because you're not as much leading, you're more collaborating.
Right.
You are all collectively trying to gain the same level of understanding, trying to gain the same output from the work. In AFROTC, when people delegate to different tasks, they don't necessarily even have to know what each other are doing as long as in the end the mission gets complete. When you're in engineering working on a group project, everyone should put in an equal amount of effort. That's very important. And then should try and draw the same value of knowledge from that project. So you still do delegate things, but it's more of like a percentage of the total of work rather than splitting up tasks so much. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Right. Yeah, no. I know it's really difficult when you kind of get a person and you know, like, they might not be able to do what needs to be done. So that's just a huge challenge working in groups. But yeah, just trying to make sure that everyone is putting in the same amount of effort. That's a really difficult thing, though, especially when you get people that just seem to not care as much as you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like if you feel like you have a handle, then go ahead and take control in the sense that you're going to ask people to do certain parts of the project. And you're going to have yourself do other parts of the project and kind of just trying to assess everybody's skill level, because I know for engineering, you'll have a project where there needs to be programming, there needs to be a presentation, there needs to be a paper. So like if you know that this person's really good at programming and you're not, then go ahead and have them take that. And if you know that you can knock out a solid presentation, then you go ahead and take the lead on that. So yeah, kind of just trying to know people's skills and know your partners.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Especially, I know we keep bringing back to engineering because we're both engineers, but
yeah, and that goes for other majors as well. Just trying to know what they're capable of, and if they have room to improve in something, and you feel like you can help them, then you should do that because you guys all are having the same stake. You know, your grade.
Yeah, I definitely think that engineering, you can't go back to that high school mindset where I am, like, trust myself to do work, so I'm going to do everything. No one can get through an engineering project doing it all themselves. That's literally impossible, especially when you get to higher levels. So
Right.
delegating that work, but also doing it in a way that works with people's skill sets. Yeah, that's good. Without making people feel like you're just barking orders at them.
Right.
In ROTC, you can get away with that a little bit.
You should be asking people like if they feel comfortable doing the work that you are asking them to do.
Definitely.
So how do you combat academic anxiety? So in terms of testing and, getting your work done.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And presenting.
I think your first year is definitely full of the most academic anxiety, just because you're not used to not only the level of work that you're doing, but the consequences of it, because now you're in college, like the rest of your life kind of works off of this. What you did in high school doesn't affect you as much. But I think the way I combated that was I really just put academics first my first year, and there are going to be times when you do have to. I think I messed up my first year because I kind of put academics first, but then didn't put anything else behind it. So I would focus on academics, and it would be from like whenever in the morning until when I went to sleep. That would be my entire focus. And I think as I went on, there were times where I remember it was our ENED final, and we had some robots in this cage, and there was like a final project, and our robot basically like tore itself apart on like the testing floor, which we weren't the only ones for that to happen to. But I did not have a good time after that. That put me in a really bad mental state because I put so much time and effort into something without any kind of leeway to bring it back. So what I did the next semester, obviously a new group of people with ENED, but I kind of took some nights and I would allot myself free time. So I would make sure that I had time to myself, so that way when things inevitably do go wrong, because you're going to have to expect yourself to fail sometimes, because that's the best way we learn, and it's just going to happen.
Right.
So when that does happen, you haven't spent your last month of your life on that entirely. You have other aspects of yourself you can kind of rely on. So yeah, it kind of sounds dumb, but one of the ways to deal with academic stress is to give yourself time to do things other than academics.
Yeah, that's a big thing. But like you said, allowing yourself to fail and not being totally disappointed in yourself when you fail, that's a good way to sort of combat that anxiety of failing. So if you know and you kind of accept that sometimes it's just not going to work out the way you want it to, and then it doesn't, it's kind of a good way to not worry about it so much. Yeah, I agree. Also, I know testing anxiety is a huge thing. I have it really bad. I get really nervous before tests, and I think a way that I kind of calm myself down a little bit is just making sure I'm prepared. Yeah, I think another thing I did with testing anxiety was just having a quick talk with your professor, because they're the ones who set up the exam. They know every question on there and they know the answers to it. So if you come to them with even a question that you might kind of know most of the answer to, but have a slight inkling that you might get it wrong in the exam, just come to them and talk to them for like 20 to 25 minutes, and they'll, especially for first years, they're very reassuring. Every professor that comes by, even the ones who get the worst reviews and the ones who everyone doesn't like, they'll talk to you, they'll calm you down, and they'll say, hey, don't worry about this for the exam, focus on this for like an hour and you'll be golden. And that always kind of really helped me, because now the person who's evaluating me knows my face. I talk to them, they know I'm trying on the exam, so not only does that help, but they gave me a piece of advice that I can go in there and walk into confidently with. Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because I think for me, I definitely struggle with talking to professors, because I just feel like I don't know what to ask sometimes. But just going to them with, just a question that's simple, they'll often kind of guide your conversation. Exactly. They'll be like, well, don't focus on that, focus on these questions. And then you're like, okay, I see what's going to be on the exam. So how do you keep your mind sharp when you are overloaded with academic work? You kind of touched on that a little bit, but how? You were talking about making sure you allot free time for your other things. Yeah, I think I found myself in the engineering library a lot to do my homework, and giving myself a physical location where I just get assignments done is good. But then I found myself maybe like playing games on my phone or getting distracted with YouTube videos a little bit. It's just distracting yourself for like 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, but that would turn, for me at least, it would turn from 10 minutes into like 2 hours. So what I had to do is I had to find a new physical location, and I would reserve, there was a seat by the window in this one engineering library that I would only go to if I had something urgent to get done. So when I sat in that seat, I would just crank out stuff for like 2 hours straight. So that spot I could not touch my phone in. You can put your phone in like do not disturb and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's more along the lines of like,
It's pretty hardcore.
yeah, that's more along the lines of just being time efficient.
Uh-huh.
A lot of the other times I would be up till 2 a.m. with an assignment I could have been done by 10 p.m. and that was not as as smooth. But
we've all been there.
yeah, but as far as keeping your mind sharp,
I think just letting yourself do something that you want to do.
yeah,
You know? Like,
do what you want to do. And
watch
then,
an episode of a show that you're watching, or just go for a run
yeah, I would say something to
if you have the time.
yeah, if you have the time. I'd say something that really helped me was distracting yourself with other people. So I would go to the debt,
that's
just
good.
talk to them about something completely unrelated to what I was working on. So like if I work on physics homework for like 2 hours, I would then go to the debt and just sit there and talk with the people, chill out there, play foosball for a bit. Something that will distract your mind that's somewhat constructive. That's why Afrothy can kind of help in those senses because yes, you have a lot of work to do. But when you have those other smaller tasks, like say you got to study for some warrior knowledge or whatever, if you already kind of have it down, maybe help someone else. But
Yeah.
working with
So bringing in other people.
yeah, to just kind of clear your mind and work on something else for a bit. That definitely.
Yeah, and
definitely
another thing about bringing in other people is like for me, I know like if I have a lot going on, I will often cut out time with friends. So, you know, just to make sure I'm not just sinking into the same old habits, I make sure I make time with friends. I call them, text them, you know, ask them to get lunch or, you know, go for a walk and then get back to my work.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you cope when you receive a grade that is lower than what you wanted or a grade that you feel like you didn't deserve? So that's kind of two different questions.
I don't know if you can talk on this. I know I can talk on this.
I can.
Yeah. But no, that's going to happen to everyone. But that was kind of what we touched on was the acceptance of failure, which is something that you can't just do. Like when we talk about organization or we talk about how to maybe stay mentally sharp or what settings are best, that's like a definite answer that you can just go do yourself. I think the first thing you should do is accept that you're going to get bad grades, accept that you're not always going to get the ones that you want.
Yeah.
And that's something you just have to do
that's
personally.
a hard thing to accept.
I wish I could say what process I kind of went through for that, but for me, I just kind of failed once or twice and then came to accept that. I definitely still have like a threshold that I don't want to go below. You know, everyone wants to get A's on everything. But if it doesn't and you still are in a place that you can go long term with your future, that's totally fine. I think other than just knowing you're going to fail, for me, looking long term really helps out.
Yes.
Because you know that, at least in RTC, everyone will hear this a lot, there's a minimum GPA that you have to keep. There's a minimum GPA for a scholarship, there's a minimum GPA to really stay competitive in whatever career you're going into. But those are kind of standards that you try and like shoot above.
You know, your GPA isn't as important as you might feel it is.
Exactly.
At times. It is important to make sure you're meeting those thresholds, but just make sure you're not sacrificing your mental health for it.
Exactly. So I'll say just one more thing about that is that obviously, like I said, accepting failure is something you have to do just throughout life. But as long as you meet those GPA thresholds, that's something that goes on like your resume and everything. So you want to keep your GPA high. But I had a decent GPA going into like my first co-op rotations, but none of the co-ops I got were because of my GPA. I had references from other friends. I had personal skills. So like the lab I'm working at right now, I didn't get in because of my GPA. I got in because I had been working in the field of study that they were interested in for like the last 5 years of my life. That's just a personal skill that I had.
Right.
So while it is important and you have to reach the minimum requirements for your scholarship or whatever, it's not something that defines you. And
it's just a number.
It's just a number. And there are other personal things that, like if I had only given myself time to get a 4.0 GPA, I would have never had time to grow the other skills that were the things that actually got me like my co-ops. So there's a lot of great things that come out of life from things that are not a GPA.
Yeah.
You got to remind yourself of that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I know for me, when I get a grade that is lower than what I wanted, it's kind of hard because I always feel like I put a lot of work and effort into the grade, but then it ends up being something that I didn't want, and it just feels really gloomy, like, why am I even trying this hard if it's just going to be a grade that I don't want? But then you kind of just wake up the next day, and it's another day, and you know what to do next time to fix your mistakes, and you can just learn from that.
Yeah, I agree.
But then there's the other side of this, when you get a grade that you feel like you didn't deserve.
Yeah. It's like when you say deserve, you just mean like...
So the professor gives you a grade, and they explain to you, or they give you your comments, and they're explaining the things about your work that this is the reason why you got the grade, and you just don't agree with that. I've dealt with this before, and I just email the professor, and I make sure I address everything that they've told me, and I just address all their concerns, and, you know, if they agree with you, then they'll change your grade. If they don't, then they won't, and you kind of move on. But just make sure you try if you think that you deserve a better grade.
Yeah, there were definitely times where I've seen a grade and then I'll talk to my professor about it, and if you... There's a thing to be said about the collective power of, like, a class. So it sounds weird when I say it.
No,
but,
go on.
But, like, you and me are in the aerospace engineering class of 2023.
Right.
There are a lot of times where all of us will receive a grade on an exam, or all of us will struggle in a certain portion that the professor put on the exam, or some certain concept that might not have been covered as in depth. And if you can voice your opinions on that with the rest of your class and show, hey, I'm not the only one who struggled with this, all of these criticisms you gave me are things that all of my peers are also struggling with, they'll probably look at it in a different light. Like, I'll say, for example, like in our thermodynamics and fluid dynamics classes, our professor, he would look at things that we learned in each of our classes, and we would collectively voice a concern about certain concepts, and he would say, okay, we're not going to put that on the exam, I'll just give you an assignment on this so it's not as heavy weighted on your grade. So that's kind of the preemptive thing, and I think, like you were saying, just emailing your professor, but that doesn't really work if you don't have a relationship to begin with.
True.
So even in your freshman year, which it kind of sounds weird because those professors deal with like 400 students, but when you get higher level, it makes more sense to just reach out to your professor with questions that, even if you don't really have questions, ask questions that like might be outside the scope of your learning. Like if you just have a curiosity about certain subjects, just so they know your name and they know that you're actively involved academically. Because essentially when they're looking at grades, professors know who try, and if they get to know you and they know your name and they know your face, they're not going to fail you. Just from personal experience, I know that. But it also kind of helps them if you're like at an 89.9 and maybe this extra credit you did could help out or whatnot. So
yeah, just don't be afraid to try, and don't be afraid to talk to your professors.
Yeah, it definitely helps if they know you beforehand, though.
Right. Yeah, so like don't be afraid to get your relationship started.
Yes, exactly.
So last question, what is your favorite quote, and can you please explain it?
Gosh, I have a lot of quotes. So, and AFROTC. Especially when you go up into FTP, you're going to have to learn a lot of quotes from a lot of generals, and they all mean a lot of different things. But for me, personally, I liked Stephen Hawking growing up. So he was kind of an inspiration for me, and I had no intention of going into the military or even engineering up until about 2 years before I went to college. And one quote from him is that intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. So, especially in the military, people will go through changes more frequently than you would in a lot of other career fields. That's going to be true both in your college life and then after you commission and once you become a military officer. And I think intelligence is the ability to adapt to change. Doesn't necessarily relate to the intelligence of like academics, of if you have a 4.0 GPA. It's about the intelligence required to go through life and come out successfully in your own terms. So, like, I know if I hadn't adapted my academic plan to what it is today, I wouldn't be as successful as I am today. And then if I don't adapt it in the future, I know for a fact 5 years down the line, I'm not going to be exactly where I think I am today. There's going to be something different. And that life intelligence, that ability to go through and change your current situation, change your future plans, and adapt to the environment and the world around you as you move through life is essential to become successful by whatever metric you choose that to be.
Right. Yeah, I do really like him as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sad he died. I met him once.
Really?
Yeah, he was in Cambridge going up to a conference, and he was just getting wheeled in there, and I got to see him for it. He didn't have his voice box on, but yeah, met him once.
Okay, well, thank you, Cadet Lemieux, for talking with me about academics today and sharing with us all of your study tips and organization tips and some good advice on talking to professors and making sure they know your face and building that relationship. If you guys have any questions at all about anything we've talked about today, please feel free to reach out to me or Cadet Lemieux. We'd be happy to continue the conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I know especially for those new engineering kids or whatnot, maybe I can give them a more thought out and paper answer on any questions they have, but definitely as your academic officer, I know a lot about the beginning struggle, so please reach out if you want help with literally anything, even if it's post-ROTC world.
Okay, Aircats, well, remember to fly, fight, and win, and I will catch you next time on Aircast.